Hello everyone, this is Dr. Alex Vasquez, starting a video series of tutorials to help demonstrate and explain some of the more important information and major concepts from my various books, ebooks, and articles. I hope to provide you some personal and insightful explanations. I think these will be helpful because the terminology and concepts are often complex, and also because reading is an active and sometimes exhausting process, and it doesn't always ensure the successful transmission of information. We might say that different learning technologies provide different advantages and disadvantages. For example, paper books provide an organized structure, and they also provide a physical or kinesthetic reality. You get to actually touch the pages, you get to touch the diagrams, you can draw over the diagrams, you can highlight the information, you can take notes. So paper books are rather famous, especially these days, for providing what's called deep learning. Paper books also, of course, provide words, images, and many of the citations that help us to understand and ultimately feel confident with the work. Ebooks, of course, are similar to paper books in that they provide words, images, and citations. Audiobooks provide a passive experience, and this is good because it allows repetition and reinforcement, but audiobooks don't provide a kinesthetic or physical experience, and they, of course, don't provide any visuals. Many people prefer face-to-face teaching and learning, but these experiences disappear rather quickly and leave us with no way to review and reinforce the information except from our own notes. Videos provide the experience of being able to listen to the instructor's voice, also getting to hear the personal experiences of the instructor or the author that may have not been included within the written work. Videos can also, of course, provide images and also dynamic images to show how things move and relate with each other. Also, videos can provide reinforcement because as long as you have access to the video, you can always play it again and again, maybe study it diligently the first one or two times that you watch it, but then otherwise let the video kind of play in the background, and in that sense you're using it kind of like an audiobook. And certainly I have the experience of listening to many audiobooks, for example, when I was doing housework, yard work, or exercise. So the ability to expose ourselves somewhat passively to the material after we've studied it once or twice, but then to let it wash over us as we're doing other things, can help reinforce major concepts, help let some of those memory cues kind of sink in at a deeper level, so that again we get to experience the information in a different way and gain additional insights as we are re-exposed to the material through passive repetition. And videos, of course, can be very convenient because they allow us to expose ourselves to the material many times until we've achieved the level of mastery that we desire. The work that I'm going to review with you is actually very important because it helps to explain the cause and treatment of many common health disorders, diseases, and ailments. Regarding cost effectiveness, even the most expensive of the books and courses will easily pay for themselves, likely within the first day or week within the context of a clinical practice. For smaller condition-specific books on topics such as migraine and fibromyalgia, patients can buy these for a very low price, comparable to coffee and a snack, and certainly less expensive than a visit with a clinician. All of this work is based on research, clinical practice, and experience, and I've been developing this work now from the start of my teaching career back at Bastyr University, where I taught orthopedics and rheumatology. From those teaching experiences, I developed my course notes into two textbooks, Integrative Orthopedics in 2004, Integrative Rheumatology in 2006. And I've continued to validate the work in peer-reviewed professional articles and postgraduate conferences. So now I'll show you some examples and some of the benefits of this upcoming video tutorial series. And I'll show you some of the information that will be included and some of the technology that will be used. Inflammation Mastery is the source textbook for the majority of my work, so let's take a look at the table of contents from that book. You can see that listed here. As you can see from the table of contents, Chapter 1 includes patient assessments, laboratory interpretation, clinical concepts, patient management, practice management, and risk reduction. Chapter 2 reviews wellness promotion and the naturopathic concept of reestablishing the foundation for health. Chapter 3 reviews basic concepts and therapeutics in non-drug musculoskeletal care and integrative pain management. In Chapter 4, I review the major modifiable factors in sustained inflammation. This is also what I refer to as the functional inflammology protocol. In Chapter 4, I discuss food and nutrition, infections and dysbiosis, nutritional immunomodulation, dysmetabolism, mitochondrial dysfunction, endoplasmic reticulum stress, the unfolded protein response, and also mTOR. I talk about special considerations such as sleep, sociopsychology, stress, and surgery, also specialized supplementation. Part 6 reviews endocrine and hormonal imbalances, and in Part 7 I discuss xenobiotic immunotoxicity. Chapters 1 through 4 were also published separately as a book titled Volume 1, and I'll detail that more in this introduction. Chapter 5, also known as Volume 2, discusses clinical applications of my functional inflammology protocol. The clinical conditions reviewed in Chapter 5 include hypertension, diabetes, migraine, fibromyalgia, allergic inflammation, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, systemic lupus erythematosus, also known as lupus or SLE, scleroderma and systemic sclerosis, vasculitic diseases, spondyloarthropathies and reactive arthritis, Sjogren's syndrome, and Raynaud syndrome. I finished Chapter 5 with some brief clinical sections on conditions such as sarcoidosis and dermatomyositis. The textbook Inflammation Mastery is nearly 1,200 pages. It's actually 1,182 pages, very densely formatted. The book is also available in an ebook or Kindle book format. The ebook, of course, provides very convenient access to the information, which can be loaded into your smartphone, iPad, home, and office computer. Now let's take a quick look inside at some of the details of that information. Again, Inflammation Mastery is the main or core textbook from which all of the other work is derived. The exact same chapters were published as Textbook of Clinical Nutrition and Functional Medicine because I had many students request a more convenient 2-volume set rather than a single large textbook. You can see that the work contains many diagrams, in this case explaining neuroexcitotoxicity as a consequence of neuroinflammation, and also neurotransmitter reception, and also here neurotransmitter interconversion, in this case the conversion of excitotoxic glutamate into neuroinhibitory GABA. You can see here that I detail fibromyalgia and also the neuroinflammation, which is a cause of the pain and also a consequence of the underlying pathophysiology. Here again you see mention of increased glutaminergic neurotransmission, which leads to central sensitization, fatigue, and depression. I provide many original diagrams in the book, and you can see part of a diagram here discussing the role of mitochondrial dysfunction in neuroexcitation, neuroinflammation, and central sensitization. This page from a different chapter provides you a graphic illustration of endoplasmic reticulum stress and the resultant unfolded protein response. You'll see that the triggers for endoplasmic reticulum stress include metabolic insults such as hyperglycemia and hyperlipidemia, microbial insults from viruses and bacteria, and also xenobiotic insults from drugs and corporate pollution. All of those can feed into and exacerbate endoplasmic reticulum stress, which leads to the unfolded protein response, and that, of course, contributes to sustained inflammation. The books provide explanations of diseases and their treatments, also case reports, including laboratory interpretation and clinical interventions and outcomes. Here on the left-hand page, we see a diagram of the pathophysiology involved with dysbiosis-induced disease. Here again on the left-hand page, I provide you an original diagram showing you a representation of the interconnections between organelle dysfunction, such as endoplasmic reticulum stress and mitochondrial dysfunction, with inflammation and also oxidant stress, and how these synergize to create a clinical phenotype which we appreciate as a specific disease presentation or a combination of several diagnoses at the same time in the same patient. Also, quite obviously, what you're looking at are color diagrams and pre-highlighted text of the most important concepts that require illustration or additional emphasis. Again, this is available as a printed full-color textbook and also as a digital book for smartphones, iPads, home and office computers. Of course, the work itself is based on peer-reviewed research, and I've also published some excerpts and reviews from the book in the following peer-reviewed medical journals, including Nature Reviews Rheumatology, British Medical Journal, Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, Journal of the American Medical Association, Journal of the American Osteopathic Association, Journal of Manipulative and Physiological Therapeutics. I had one letter published at thelancet.com, also Annals of Pharmacotherapy, Alternative Therapies in Health and Medicine twice, Nutritional Perspectives 11 times, Current Allergy and Asthma Reports, Integrative Medicine 3 times, Complementary Therapies in Clinical Practice, and one of my earlier publications, one of my first publications, was actually in Arthritis and Rheumatism, which is the official journal of the American College of Rheumatology. Also in 2008, I published a commissioned CME monograph for the Institute for Functional Medicine entitled Musculoskeletal Pain, Expanded Clinical Strategies. I've published approximately 100 articles, and I've made most of these available either at inflammationmastery.com/reprints, which is simply a folder of excerpts and PDF articles, also on academia.edu, and also at the main website of ichnfm.org. Again, my main textbook is Inflammation Mastery 4th edition, which is nearly 1,200 pages, and I pretty much consider it to be 10 books in one. That would be 10 books of 120 pages each, but again, with my dense formatting, each of those books would probably come out to be more like 200 or 300 pages. The paper book is available at a discount at ichnfm.org, and the digital ebook is available in the Kindle format from amazon.com and also as a digital book from barnesandnoble.com. Again, the main book, Inflammation Mastery, has also been published in smaller pieces, we might say, or smaller excerpts. These include Textbook of Clinical Nutrition and Functional Medicine, and again, by popular request from students, I was asked to divide the work, Inflammation Mastery, into 2 volumes, so the students wouldn't have to carry such a heavy book, and also because Volume 1 had originally been published in 2014. Breaking it down still further, Brain Inflammation is published at a discount in black and white printing. Pain Revolution for migraine headaches and fibromyalgia is the full color printed version. The small section on migraines is published as an inexpensive digital book, as is the section on fibromyalgia. Parts of Chapter 1 were published in a book detailing laboratory interpretation, patient management, and risk reduction. This is 174 pages for only $10 US, and you can see the hyperlink for purchase at the bottom of the page. The video book series should give you most of the advantages of each of these, including voice, personal experience and explanations, images, reinforcement, and convenience, as well as any updates since the work was published. Now I'd like to show you some examples of what I mean by this term video book and how I can use this technology to explain the important concepts and terminology within these books so that you understand better how to apply this either in your clinical practice or in your personal life. In order to show you an example, we're going to look inside Inflammation Mastery at the section on migraine and fibromyalgia, which was also published as Pain Revolution in color and also Brain Inflammation in a discounted black and white grayscale printing. So what we're able to do these days is actually look inside the book, and that gives me a chance to kind of review with you what I think are some of the more perhaps confusing terms and more complex disease models that ultimately underlie and support the scientific basis for the treatment plan that I've outlined. So let's look here at Chapter 5.1, Migraine, Cluster, and Other Headaches. You can see that I provide a description and then dive right into the current model of pathophysiology, which my point number 1 is to state that mitochondrial impairment is the origin of migraine and cluster headache. I then go on to connect that immediately with sustained glial activation, which results from mitochondrial dysfunction and causes brain inflammation and hyperexcitation. Those concepts might sound new or perhaps complicated, but again, the advantage to being able to look inside the book and explain the major concepts page by page is that I get to show you these diagrams that I've created, again showing the connection between mitochondrial dysfunction or mitochondrial impairment and how that leads in a stepwise fashion to microglial activation, astrocyte activation, neuronal hyperexcitation, and that leads to neuroinflammation, which then feeds back into more microglial activation. You can also see that represented here in another image, and this image actually formed the basis for calling this work pain revolution, because we're looking at this go around in a circle or a vicious cycle. Again, with mitochondrial dysfunction leading to microglial or microglial activation and astrocyte activation, leading back to brain neuron excitation. And this triad is what we now call neuroinflammation, which leads to central sensitization or increased sensitivity to pain inputs. After that introduction and those two preliminary diagrams, then of course we get into more details for understanding the pathophysiologic model that I present for chronic pain, migraine, other types of headaches, and of course body-wide chronic pain syndromes such as fibromyalgia. You can see that I highlight some of the things that I consider to be important, and all of the scientific citations are at the bottom of each page so that you can evaluate them within the context of the section that you're reading. Here again, I have another model that I worked on actually for about 8 years, and this is a model of a glutamate neurotransmitter receptor and its neighbor, the GABA receptor. Glutamate gets converted into GABA if nutritional supply is sufficient. Also, nutrients modulate the inflow of calcium ions, and the specific nutrients that are illustrated here are magnesium and zinc. I provide quite a bit of description for these images, especially when they're more complex. You can see the description here takes up more than a page, actually 2 entire pages. And then the following pages provide a differential diagnosis for different conditions that can appear similar to migraine headache. And soon thereafter, we get into the treatment protocol, which again is modeled after my functional inflammology protocol and the FIND-SEX acronym. Again, at the bottom of each page, you can see an abundance of citations to the peer-reviewed scientific and biomedical literature. I also used these text boxes to pull out a few clinical pearls that are of particular importance for the management and treatment of these conditions, again, in this case, specifically migraine. Again, throughout the text, I've got emphasis and illustrations to help the information stay in your mind so that you can apply it clinically, whether you're treating patients or whether you're treating yourself. In the conversation on mitochondrial dysfunction, here I've illustrated for you the mitochondrial electron transport chain and items which either stimulate energy production or impair energy production. And you'll be able to see that those are different for each one of the 5 major complexes of the electron transport chain. On the following page, I have an outline of the entire metabolic process of ATP production, going through glycolysis, the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex into the Krebs cycle, and then the mitochondrial electron transport chain here. Also in the upper right of this image, we see alternative inputs such as fructose, fatty acids, ketones, alcohol, and amino acids. So again, the way that I initially memorized and diagrammed this illustration is to divide it into 5 components, and these are glycolysis, pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain number 4, and number 5, alternative inputs, fructose, ketones, fatty acids, alcohol, and amino acids. Now let's take a quick look at the section on fibromyalgia and complex regional pain syndrome. Again, you see that I follow, of course, the same outline or the same format, providing an introductory conversation and then outlining the clinical presentation and pathophysiology, again, well supported with an abundance of citations. Here we see images from published research showing the differences in mitochondrial size and function in normal healthy controls and patients with fibromyalgia. So obviously these scientific images underscore the physical organic reality of fibromyalgia as a mitochondrial disease, and then I follow this hard science, let's say, with some conceptual and creative images to help you understand how we used to see pain and how we currently envision the pain reception process as a much more dynamic and flowing and plastic process rather than the hardwired process which we all learned in anatomy and neurophysiology. These days, our understanding of chronic pain is much more creative, much more plastic, much more complex, and in fact is based on neuroplasticity and neuroinflammation. Also in the section on fibromyalgia, I review with you the 1990 criteria and the new criteria published in 2010. I also review the approved drugs for fibromyalgia, including the fact that each one of these drugs comes with a black box warning. I also review the approximate costs of these drugs in US dollars. After providing an introduction to the disease, its clinical presentation, and social context, I then provide the most important considerations in the differential diagnosis of widespread pain and fibromyalgia. And then I compile the data into an innovative model of fibromyalgia, of course based on gastrointestinal dysbiosis, mitochondrial impairment, and neuroinflammation. And you'll see that I detail that over the course of quite a few pages, also providing more diagrams to provide additional insight and understanding into this rather complex and enigmatic condition. So just like we can all state things in different ways to provide a different understanding or a more nuanced understanding or to emphasize certain aspects, I can also provide different diagrams, each with a little bit of a different twist, we might say, or a little bit of different angle or perspective, to provide you more emphasis and more ways to appreciate, understand, and ultimately treat fibromyalgia. Here, for example, I provide a graphic representation of several different contributors to acute and chronic neuroinflammation. Additional diagrams here, in this case, showing a vicious cycle of pain and central sensitization, and again here, another diagram showing different contributors to neuroinflammation, again including mitochondrial impairment. Again, as we go through these pages, you'll see more diagrams here and here, more research, more emphasis, and again, of course, more citations at the bottom of just about every page. An additional diagram here on the mitochondria, more treatments, more research, and additional videos to help reinforce and give additional information on this condition, fibromyalgia. So now that we've taken a look inside the book of Inflammation Mastery and the specific section on migraine and fibromyalgia, printed in a discounted grayscale version as Brain Inflammation and in full color as Pain Revolution, now let's take a look at where the videos will be hosted, and I'll give you a little bit more information. First of all, I already have some videos available. These are from our 2013 International Conference on Human Nutrition and Functional Medicine. I also have a section on human microbiome and dysbiosis in clinical disease. Also, we have a section on mitochondrial medicine and mitochondrial nutrition with speakers Matt Hershey from Duke University, Garth Nicholson from the Institute of Molecular Medicine, Michael Gonzalez from the University of Puerto Rico, and your current host from International College of Human Nutrition and Functional Medicine. Now we're talking about the video series on brain inflammation. And again, all of these videos either are already available or will be available very shortly. Access to those videos is available on vimeo.com/ICHNFM/VOD_pages. VOD in this context stands for Video on Demand. So these are the video on demand pages of ICHN FM hosted at vimeo.com. Each of these video albums will also have its own page, for example, vimeo.com on demand brain inflammation. And you can simply link to these different video albums from our page at ichnfm.org/videos. So thank you very much for taking a look at this quick introductory video to the upcoming video books, where in video format I actually go through each page of the book to explain the major concepts and any vocabulary so that you, as the reader, as the clinician and patient, can actually understand this information at a deeper level. And again, it also gives me a chance to provide you any updates to the material that have been incorporated into the protocol since the book was published. So again, thank you for your time and interest, and I look forward to bringing you more science and more clinical applications.